At Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood up and announced that I was suspended from the family business until I apologized to my brother. 63 relatives went silent. My mother nodded like she was watching a reasonable verdict being delivered. And my brother, Ryan, sat there with his arms crossed, smirking at me from across the table like he'd won something. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at my father, then at Ryan and said one word, "All right." Dad seemed surprised. Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Ryan's smirk widened. The next morning at 7 a.m., someone was pounding on my apartment door hard enough to shake the frame. I opened it to find Ryan, white-faced, shaking, holding his phone like it had burned him. "The documents," he said. "The ones you sent to the board. Please tell me you haven't." I just stepped aside and let him see my laptop screen. The sent folder, the timestamps, the 53 recipients. Behind him, my father's car screeched into the parking lot. Dad stumbled out still in his bathrobe, phone pressed to his ear, shouting something about lawyers. I should have seen it coming. 36 years of being the family's afterthought, their backup plan, their convenient ATM. But it took that Thanksgiving dinner to finally understand. They were never going to see me. Not unless I made it impossible to look away. That morning started like most mornings had for the past 8 years. I was in my corner office at Harrison and Associates by 6 a.m., reviewing contracts, answering emails from overseas clients, making sure the machine kept running. My name's Derek Harrison. And yes, that Harrison, as in the family whose name has been on buildings in this city for 3 generations. At 36, I was the one who'd actually built something with that name. Not inherited it, not coasted on it, built it. From a struggling regional firm to a company with 200 employees and contracts across 4 continents. Dad liked to take credit at cocktail parties, of course. "My boys run the business," he'd say, always plural, always including Ryan, who hadn't closed a deal in 6 years and spent most of his days at the golf course charging lunches to the company card. But that's getting ahead of the story. To understand what happened at Thanksgiving, you need to understand what it was like growing up as the other Harrison son. Ryan is 3 years older than me. According to family legend, he walked early, talked early, smiled at strangers who stopped Mom on the street to tell her what a beautiful baby she had. There are photo albums dedicated to his childhood, his first steps, his first words, his first day of school, his little league games where Dad coached the team just to be close to him. My photo album is thinner. There's my birth announcement, which someone tucked into the back of Ryan's album like an afterthought. A few blurry snapshots from holidays where I'm partially cut off at the edge of the frame. My kindergarten photo that Mom forgot to order copies of, so there's just the one, water-stained, that I found in a box in the garage when I was 12. "You were such an easy baby," Mom told me once, when I was maybe 7 and asked why there weren't more pictures of me. "You never cried, never demanded attention. We barely knew you were there." She said it like it was a compliment. I learned early that invisibility was my role in this family. Ryan was the star. I was the audience. And audiences are supposed to stay quiet and watch. When Ryan struggled with math in middle school, Dad hired 3 tutors. When I tested into the gifted program, no one came to the ceremony. When Ryan got caught cheating on his SATs, Mom called in favors to make it disappear. When I got a full scholarship to Stanford, Dad asked if I was sure I wouldn't rather stay close to home and go to the state school like Ryan. "Family sticks together," he said. "You don't abandon your brother." Ryan barely graduated from the state school with a business degree he'd copied his way through. I graduated Stanford summa cum laude with dual degrees in finance and international business. Guess which one of us Dad introduced to the board of directors first? It was always like this. Ryan's failures were circumstances. My successes were accidents. When Ryan crashed the company car 3 months into his job at the family firm, Dad bought him a new one. When I landed our first international contract 2 years later, saving the company from bankruptcy that no one wanted to talk about, Dad nodded and said, "That's what you're supposed to do. You're a Harrison." By 30, I'd stopped expecting recognition. I'd stopped expecting anything except more work, more responsibility, and more of Ryan's messes to clean up. What I didn't expect was to still be paying for a crime I didn't commit. The incident happened 3 months before Thanksgiving. Ryan had been working on a deal with Meridian Corp, a manufacturing company looking to expand into Asian markets. I say working on loosely. What Ryan actually did was take the clients to expensive dinners, promise them things we couldn't deliver, and then disappear for a golf weekend when the contracts needed to be finalized. I got called in to salvage the deal. Spent 6 weeks sleeping 4 hours a night, renegotiating terms Ryan had bungled, rebuilding trust he'd destroyed. By the end, I'd not only saved the Meridian deal, but expanded it into a 5-year partnership worth $40 million. The celebration dinner was at Carmine's, the Italian restaurant downtown where our family had been going since Dad was a kid. Private room in the back. 14 people, including the Meridian executives, their wives, my parents, Ryan, and me. Dad made a toast. To the Harrison legacy, he said, raising his glass. And to Ryan, whose vision made this partnership possible. I watched Ryan grin and accept the applause. Watched him shake hands with executives whose names he still couldn't remember. Watched my father beam at him like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. Something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, quiet break somewhere deep inside. During dessert, Martin Chun, Meridian's CEO, asked Ryan a technical question about the implementation timeline. Something basic, something anyone who'd actually worked on the deal would know. Ryan fumbled, badly, started making things up, contradicted the contract terms we'd spent weeks negotiating. I didn't plan what happened next. I just started talking, correcting, explaining, answering the questions Ryan couldn't. And somewhere in the middle of my explanation, I mentioned that I'd been the one handling the negotiations since July. Martin's eyebrows rose. I thought Ryan. He looked between us. Derek helped out with some of the details. Ryan cut in, his neck flushing red. Technical stuff. You know how it is. Derek restructured the entire deal, Martin said slowly. The profit-sharing model, the timeline, the contingencies. That was all in the documents you sent. He turned to me. Those were your documents, weren't they? I should have deflected. Should have let Ryan take credit one more time. But I was tired. 8 years of tired. Yes, I said. They were. The rest of the dinner was tense. Dad kept changing the subject. Mom laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. Ryan didn't speak to me. When we left, Dad grabbed my arm in the parking lot. What the hell was that? He hissed. The truth. You humiliated your brother. In front of important people. I answered a question. Dad's face went red. We'll discuss this later. Later turned out to be a series of family meetings over the next 2 months where the topic was always the same. Derek needed to apologize to Ryan. Derek had embarrassed the family. Derek had acted inappropriately. Not once did anyone mention that Ryan had taken credit for my work. Not once did anyone acknowledge that I'd saved a deal he'd almost destroyed. The only crime that mattered was that I'd told the truth in front of witnesses. Just apologize, Mom said during one of our discussions. What does it cost you? A few words, and this whole thing goes away. What am I apologizing for? For making Ryan feel small. I thought about the 6 weeks of my life I'd spent fixing Ryan's mistakes. The $40 million deal I'd saved. The 8 years before that. I'll think about it, I said. I thought about it. I thought about every time I'd been overlooked, dismissed, erased. I thought about the photo album I wasn't in. The ceremony no one came to. The scholarship that wasn't worth celebrating because it meant I was leaving. And I thought about the documents I'd found 3 years ago, locked in Dad's desk drawer, that explained everything. I'd never told anyone about those documents. They'd felt too dangerous, too final. Like if I opened that door, I could never close it again. But sitting in my apartment after another family meeting, where I was expected to grovel for the crime of being honest, I realized the door was already open. It had been open my whole life. I just hadn't been willing to walk through it. I started making copies, started organizing, started preparing. Thanksgiving approached like a storm on the horizon. Mom called twice to remind me that it was being held at the Harrison estate this year, that all 63 extended family members would be there, that this would be a perfect opportunity for me to apologize to Ryan and put this unpleasantness behind us. "We want you there," she said, in a tone that meant they wanted me there to perform contrition in front of witnesses. I said I'd be there, and I would be, just not the way they expected. The Harrison estate sits on 40 acres of prime land that's been in the family since my great-great-grandfather made his fortune in textiles. The main house is a 12,000 square foot colonial that looks like it belongs in a magazine spread about old money. In some ways, it's the physical embodiment of everything the Harrison name represents: wealth, history, legacy. What the magazines don't show is what that legacy cost. The workers exploited in those early textile mills. The bribes paid to politicians over the decades. The convenient erasure of anyone who didn't fit the image of Harrison perfection. I drove up the long driveway at 2 p.m. on Thanksgiving, watching the familiar landscape of manicured lawns and ancient oaks. Other cars were already parked in neat rows along the circular drive. Mercedes and BMWs mostly, with a few Teslas thrown in for the younger cousins who wanted to look progressive. Inside, the house was already full of voices and laughter. Aunts and uncles I saw once a year. Cousins I barely knew. Great-aunts who always confused me with Ryan and complimented me on golf games I'd never played. "Derek!" Mom swept toward me in a silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her hug was brief, perfunctory, more performance than affection. "So glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it." Her eyes searched my face, looking for signs of compliance. "Ryan's in the study with your father. Maybe you should go say hello before dinner. Clear the air." "I'll find them." The study was at the back of the house, a wood-paneled room lined with leather-bound books no one had ever read. Dad was there with Ryan and a few of the uncles, drinking whiskey and talking about the stock market. They went quiet when I walked in. "Derek." Dad's voice was neutral, careful. "Glad you're here, Dad." "Ryan." I nodded to the uncles. "Happy Thanksgiving." Ryan didn't say anything, just watched me over the rim of his glass with those calculating eyes that had never quite figured me out. "Can we talk?" Dad said. "Privately." The uncles took the hint and filtered out, closing the door behind them. For a moment, it was just the three of us in that room full of books about other people's accomplishments. "Your mother said you'd thought about the situation," Dad began. "I have." And I looked at Ryan, who was trying very hard to look unconcerned. Then at Dad, whose expression was the same one he'd worn when I was 7, and he told me I couldn't have a birthday party because Ryan needed all of Mom's attention. "I'll apologize," I said. Dad's shoulders dropped with relief. Ryan smiled that smug smile he'd been perfecting since childhood. "But not here," I continued. "Not in private. If you want me to apologize, I'll do it at dinner. In front of everyone. Make it official." They exchanged glances. Dad was suspicious. Ryan was already imagining the satisfaction of watching me grovel before the entire family. "That's acceptable," Dad said slowly. "We'll do it after the toast." "After the toast," I agreed. Dinner was served at 5 p.m. in the grand dining room. A mahogany table that could seat 80, though we had 63 people squeezed around it in varying degrees of comfort. The finest china, crystal glasses that had been in the family for a century, silver that great-great-grandmother Harrison had brought from England. I sat near the end of the table, between a great-aunt who kept forgetting my name and a cousin who spent the entire meal texting. The seat of honor at the head of the table was Dad's, with Mom at the opposite end. Ryan sat at Dad's right hand, where he always sat, accepting compliments on his golf game and his new car and his wonderful wife, Jennifer, who wasn't at dinner because they'd separated last month. But nobody was supposed to mention that. The food was catered, of course. Turkey, ham, 7 different sides, 3 kinds of pie. Mom made a show of telling everyone about the recipes, as if she'd spent days in the kitchen instead of writing a check. I made small talk. I waited. After the main course, as the dishes were being cleared and dessert was being set up, Dad stood up and clinked his glass. The room went quiet. "Family," he said. his voice carrying that practiced warmth he used in board meetings. Before we enjoy this beautiful dessert, I'd like to say a few words about what it means to be a Harrison. I watched Ryan's face. He knew what was coming. His smirk was already forming. Being a Harrison means loyalty, Dad continued. It means supporting each other, even when times are difficult. It means putting family above pride. He paused, letting the words land. Recently, there's been some tension in our family, but I'm pleased to announce that tonight, we're going to put that behind us. 62 faces turned toward me. Dad extended his hand in my direction. Derek has something he'd like to say. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, felt the weight of every eye in the room. Thank you, Dad, I said, and thank you all for being here. I reached into my jacket pocket. Before I say what I came here to say, I'd like to share something with all of you. Something I've kept to myself for 3 years. Dad's expression flickered. Ryan's smirk faltered. From my pocket, I pulled out a folded piece of paper. 3 years ago, I was looking for a document in Dad's office. A contract I needed for a deal. And I found something else instead. A letter. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. A letter from a DNA testing company, addressed to Dad, dated 24 years ago. Ryan's face went white. Dad, I continued, keeping my voice steady. You already know what the letter said, but I think everyone else deserves to know too, especially Ryan. Derek. Dad's voice was a warning. Don't. The letter confirmed what Dad apparently suspected when Ryan was 12 years old. That Ryan isn't his biological son. For a moment, nothing moved. Then everything exploded. Ryan shot to his feet. That's a lie. Great-aunts gasped. Uncles looked at each other in confusion. Mom's face went through about 15 expressions in 3 seconds, settling on a shade of gray I'd never seen on a living person. It's not a lie. I unfolded the paper and held it up. This is a copy. The original is in a safety deposit box, along with several other documents Dad's been hiding for years, including the original paternity test that showed I am his biological son, and a second test, done secretly when Ryan was 12, that showed he isn't. This is ridiculous, Ryan sputtered. Dad, tell him. But Dad wasn't speaking. Dad was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not even shock. Fear. There's more, I said. Over the past 3 years, I've been investigating, hiring lawyers, accountants, looking into exactly how the family trust has been managed. And what I found was interesting. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my phone. At exactly 4 p.m. today, while everyone was having appetizers, a set of documents was automatically emailed to the board of directors at Harrison and Associates, to our lawyers, to the trustees of the Harrison Family Trust, and to a journalist at the Times who's been very interested in doing a story about generational wealth and corporate governance. Dad finally found his voice. What documents? Evidence of embezzlement. Funds transferred from the company to personal accounts, specifically to accounts in Ryan's name, totaling, over the past 6 years, approximately $4.3 million. Ryan made a sound like he'd been punched. Also evidence of fraud in the trust disbursements. Money that was supposed to go to all Harrison descendants but has somehow only ever gone to Ryan, including the $2 million business loan that was never supposed to be repaid, and the $300,000 that paid for his house. And the... Enough! Dad's voice cracked through the room. His face had gone from white to purple. Everyone out. Now. Nobody moved. I said out. There was a scramble of chairs and bodies. 60 relatives suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. Within 5 minutes, the room had emptied except for Dad, Mom, Ryan, and me. And Grandpa. I hadn't noticed him come in. He was 91 years old, the last surviving member of his generation, and he'd been in the sunroom during dinner because large gatherings tired him out. But now he was standing in the doorway, leaning on his cane, watching us with eyes that were sharper than anyone gave him credit for. George, he said to my father, his voice thin but steady, I think you'd better sit down. Dad sat, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Grandpa made his way slowly to the table and lowered himself into a chair. He looked at me for a long moment. "You found them," he said. "The documents. 3 years ago." He nodded, unsurprised. "I wondered when someone would. I told George to destroy them decades ago. But he never could let go of the proof." "Proof of what?" Ryan's voice was ragged. "None of this is true. Can't be. Dad, tell him it's not true." Dad said nothing. "It's true, Ryan." Grandpa's voice was gentle, almost kind. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I argued for telling you when you were younger. But your father, well, your father had his reasons." "Then who?" Ryan couldn't finish the question. "Your biological father was a man named Michael Torres. He worked for the company in the early days. In the warehouse. He and your mother." Grandpa trailed off, looking at Mom, who had started crying silently. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that George found out when you were 12, and instead of dealing with it honestly, he chose to bury it. But he treated me," Ryan's voice broke. "He treated me like I was special, like I was the golden child. If he knew." "He knew," Grandpa said, "and he overcompensated. Trying to convince himself, I think, that blood didn't matter, that he could love you just as much as his real son." He glanced at me, but in doing that, he forgot to love his real son at all. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at the people sitting around that table. My father, who had known for 24 years that Ryan wasn't his son and had chosen to punish me for it. My mother, whose affair had shaped the entire trajectory of my life. My brother, who wasn't my brother, whose entire identity had just crumbled. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. "The emails can be recalled," I said quietly. "I set a 4-hour delay on all of them. If you act fast enough, you might be able to contain this." Dad looked up. "What?" "I don't actually want to destroy the company. I don't want to destroy Ryan. I just wanted you to know that I could. And I wanted everyone in this family to finally see the truth." I stood up. "I'm done apologizing for things I didn't do. I'm done pretending I don't notice when you treat me like I'm invisible. And I'm done hoping that someday you'll love me the way you love him." I looked at Ryan. "The way you loved him." I walked toward the door. "Derek." It was Grandpa's voice that stopped me. "Wait." I turned. He was struggling to his feet. Mom moved to help him, but he waved her off. "I have something else to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." He made his way across the room to where I stood. "Come with me. There's a box in my room. Things that belonged to your grandmother. Things I've been saving for you." I looked back at my father, who was still sitting at the table like a man who just watched his house burn down. At my mother, whose tears had turned into something harder, more resentful. At Ryan, who was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. Then I followed Grandpa out of the dining room and up the stairs. Grandpa's room was at the end of the second-floor hallway, a corner suite that had been his since Grandma passed 15 years ago. The walls were covered with photographs, most of them black and white, documenting a century of Harrison history. He lowered himself into his chair by the window and gestured to a trunk at the foot of his bed. "Open it." I knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were layers of papers, photographs, old ledgers, the smell of age and secrets. "Your grandmother kept everything," Grandpa said. "She was like that, believed that the truth should be preserved, even when it was inconvenient. Especially when it was inconvenient." I lifted out a stack of photographs. Grandma in her youth, beautiful in that timeless way of old Hollywood stars. Grandpa as a young man, lean and serious. And then other faces I didn't recognize. Who are these people? Keep looking. Near the bottom of the trunk, I found an envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had cracked over the years. My name was written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. "She wrote that for you when you were 5 years old," Grandpa said. "Told me to give it to you when the time was right. I've been waiting 31 years for this moment." My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages long, covered in Grandma's elegant script. "My dearest Derek," it began. "If you're reading this, it means your grandfather finally decided you were ready to know the truth. I hope I'm still alive to see your face when you read it. But if I'm not, know that I loved you more than anyone else in this family ever could. You were always my favorite, and I'm not sorry for saying it." I looked up at Grandpa. His eyes were wet. "Keep reading," he said. "You've probably spent your whole life wondering why your father treats you the way he does. Why Ryan is the golden child and you're the afterthought. Why no matter what you accomplish, it's never enough. I'm going to tell you the truth, and I want you to understand something first. None of it is your fault. It was never your fault. Your father George was always a weak man. I loved my son, but I knew what he was. When Sarah got pregnant with Ryan, George suspected from the beginning that the child wasn't his. He confronted her. She admitted the affair, and George, being George, decided to pretend it had never happened. He couldn't bear the shame of being a cuckold, so he buried the truth and overcompensated by treating Ryan like a prince. Then you came along, and here's the part that breaks my heart to write. You were proof of his failure. Every time George looked at you, he was reminded that he'd forgiven his wife, that he'd accepted another man's child as his own. You, his actual biological son, became a symbol of everything he wanted to forget. It's twisted. It's wrong. And I watched it happen for years without saying anything because I was a coward. I was afraid of what the truth would do to this family. But you deserve to know. You deserve to understand that the coldness you felt, the rejection, the invisibility, none of it was because of anything you did. It was because of what you represented. I've left something else for you in this trunk. Something more practical. Look for the leather folder at the bottom. Inside you'll find copies of documents that prove George has been mismanaging your inheritance for years. The Harrison Family Trust was set up by your great-great-grandfather to provide equally for all descendants. But George has been funneling the majority of those funds to Ryan and himself, leaving you with a fraction of what you're owed. I've kept my own records. I've had my own lawyers look into it. The numbers are in the folder. Use them however you see fit. But more than the money, Derek, I want you to know this. You are a true Harrison. In every way that matters. You have the intelligence, the drive, the integrity that this family was supposed to represent. Don't let them make you small. Don't let their dysfunction define you. You are not invisible. You never were. Some people just refuse to see you. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. I sat on the floor with the letter in my hands, unable to move. Tears I didn't know I had left were running down my face. Grandpa didn't say anything. He just sat in his chair by the window, giving me time. When I finally looked up, he smiled. A sad, knowing smile. "She loved you," he said. "More than you knew. She wanted to tell you everything before she passed. But she was afraid. Afraid of what George would do. So she wrote it all down and made me promise. 15 years," I said. "You've had this for 15 years. I was waiting for you to be ready, waiting for George to give you a reason." He paused. "I'd say suspending you from the company and demanding you apologize for your brother's failures qualifies as a reason." I found the leather folder Grandma had mentioned. Inside were meticulous records going back decades, account statements, trust distributions, a paper trail that proved everything I'd already discovered on my own, and more. "There's one more thing," Grandpa said. "Something Eleanor didn't know. Something I only found out recently." I looked up. Michael Torres, Ryan's biological father. Grandpa shifted in his chair. "He's still alive." The words hit me like a physical blow. "He's 73 years old, living in Arizona. He has a family, children, grandchildren. He doesn't know about Ryan." Grandpa pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "I hired someone to find him. I thought Ryan deserved to know. Now that everything's come out. You want me to tell him? I want you to decide what to do with all of it. The money, the documents, the truth about Torres. Eleanor trusted you. I trust you." He reached out and took my hand. "You're the best of us, Derek. You always were." I stayed with Grandpa for another hour, going through the trunk, reading Grandma's other letters and notes. She documented everything. Every slight, every injustice, every time my father had chosen Ryan over me. It was like finding a witness to my own childhood. Someone who'd seen what I'd seen and known it was wrong. When I finally went back downstairs, the house was quiet. Most of the family had left. The dining room had been cleared, the evidence of Thanksgiving dinner erased as if it had never happened. I found my father in his study, sitting in the dark with a glass of whiskey. "They've been recalled," I said. "The emails." I sent a follow-up asking everyone to disregard the previous message due to a technical error. He didn't look at me. "Why?" "Because Grandma asked me to be better than you. And because destroying you wouldn't actually change anything. You'd still be the man who couldn't love his own son. I'd still be the kid who grew up invisible in his own family. The only difference would be that we'd both be poorer." Silence. "But I want something in return," I continued. "Actually, I want several things." Now he looked up. "First, I want my full share of the trust. The share Grandma calculated I'm owed. According to her records, that's approximately $8 million that should have come to me over the years and didn't." His jaw tightened. "Second, I want my seat on the board restored. Permanently, with voting rights equal to anyone else's. And third, I want you to leave me alone. No more family meetings about how I've disappointed you. No more demands that I apologize for existing. No more pretending Ryan and I are equals when we both know we never were." He was quiet for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. "You're more like your mother than I ever wanted to admit," he said. "I'll take that as a compliment." I turned to leave. "Derek." His voice stopped me at the door. "For what it's worth. I'm sorry. I didn't turn around." "No, you're not. Not yet. But maybe someday." I walked out of the study, out of the house, into the cold November air. My car was still in the driveway where I'd left it 6 hours ago. Back when I'd been a man with a plan and a burning need for justice. Now I was something else. I wasn't sure what yet. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Derek, it's Ryan. We need to talk. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Not tonight, but maybe tomorrow." His response came immediately. "I understand. Tomorrow then." I got in my car and drove away from the Harrison estate, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. 40 acres of land, 12,000 square feet of house, 3 generations of lies. I'd wanted this moment for so long. The revelation, the reckoning, the look on their faces when they finally understood what they'd done. But Grandma was right. The victory felt hollow, because nothing I did tonight would give me back my childhood. Nothing would fill the hole where a father's love should have been. Nothing would change the fact that I'd spent 36 years trying to earn something that was never available to me in the first place. The next morning, as promised, Ryan showed up at my apartment. He looked different, smaller somehow. The arrogance that had defined him his entire life seemed to have drained out overnight, leaving behind a man I barely recognized. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He stood awkwardly in my living room, looking around at the space like he'd never seen it before, which I realized he probably hadn't. In all the years I'd lived in this apartment, not once had any member of my family visited. "I've been up all night," he said, thinking, processing, trying to figure out how to even begin. "Begin what?" "Apologizing. To you." He laughed, a broken sound. "Ironic, isn't it? They spent months trying to get you to apologize to me. And now," he sat down heavily on my couch. "I didn't know," he said, "about any of it. The paternity test, the trust fund, the way they treated you. I mean, I knew on some level. I could see it. But I told myself it was normal sibling rivalry. I told myself you were just jealous of me, that you hadn't worked as hard, that you didn't deserve the same treatment. And now I don't know who I am." His voice cracked. "I thought I was George Harrison's son, the heir, the legacy. Turns out I'm the illegitimate child of a warehouse worker, and everything I thought I earned was just compensation." For their guilt. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I was horrible to you, Ryan continued. For years, decades, I took credit for your work. I let them exclude you. I told myself you deserved it because you were always so damned competent, so obviously better at everything, and it made me feel like I had to fight for every scrap of attention. It wasn't a competition, I said quietly. At least it shouldn't have been. I know that now. He looked at me, his eyes red. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not sure I'd forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What they did to you. What I helped them do. And I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. For the first time in my life, I believed him. What are you going to do? I asked. About Torres. About all of it. I don't know. Part of me wants to fly to Arizona today, knock on his door, demand answers. Part of me wants to crawl into a hole and pretend none of this ever happened. He managed a weak smile. Any advice? Don't fly to Arizona today. Give yourself time to process. And maybe, I hesitated. Maybe think about what you actually want from him. If you go there looking for a father, you might be disappointed. He doesn't know you exist. He's had 73 years of life without you in it. That's a lot of history to overcome. Ryan nodded slowly. What about us? Is there any chance we could, I don't know, start over? I don't think we can start over. Too much has happened. But maybe we can start from here, wherever that is. I'd like that. He stood up. I should go. Jennifer, my wife. She's been texting all night. Apparently Dad called her, told her the whole story. She wants to talk. I heard you two had separated. We had. But this. He shook his head. This changes things. She didn't marry into what she thought she was marrying into. I'm not who she thought I was. We've got a lot to figure out. At the door, he turned back. Thank you, he said, for not actually sending those emails. For giving us a chance to deal with this privately, as a family. Grandma asked me to be better than them. I'm trying. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. After Ryan left, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The Thanksgiving dinner, the revelation, the confrontation, Grandma's letter, the conversations with Grandpa and Ryan. I thought about the father I'd spent my whole life trying to please and the realization that he'd been punishing me for something that was never my fault. I thought about the mother who'd had an affair and then watched her husband take his resentment out on the wrong son for 3 decades. I thought about Ryan, who'd been living a lie without even knowing it, collecting privileges he hadn't earned and couldn't pay back. And I thought about Grandma, Eleanor Harrison, who'd watched all of this unfold and documented everything, leaving me a roadmap to the truth she knew I'd need someday. The leather folder was sitting on my coffee table. $8 million. My inheritance. My birthright. I could pursue it legally if I wanted. The documentation was ironclad. I could sue my own father, drag the whole sordid story into court, make sure everyone knew exactly how the Harrison family treated its own. Or I could do what Grandma had really asked me to do. I picked up my phone and called Grandpa. I'm not going to sue him, I said when he answered. I'm not going to take the money. Not through lawyers and courts anyway. Grandpa was silent for a moment. Why not? Because that's not what Grandma wanted. She didn't leave me those documents so I could get rich. She left them so I could understand. So I could finally see that the problem was never me. You're entitled to that money, Derek. It's yours. I know. And if Dad decides to do the right thing and give it to me, I'll take it. But if he doesn't, I took a breath. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I deserve to be loved. Trying to earn what should have been given freely. I'm done earning. I'm done proving. If he wants to make it right, he can make it right. But I won't beg for it anymore. Grandpa was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Your grandmother was right about you. You really are the best of us. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Slowly at first, then faster. Dad transferred $3 million into my account without explanation or fanfare. It wasn't the full $8 million Grandma had calculated. But it was something. An acknowledgement, maybe, As close to an apology as George Harrison was capable of making with money instead of words. Mom called once. 45 seconds of awkward silence before she said, "I'm sorry things turned out this way," and hung up. I didn't call her back. Ryan and I started meeting for lunch once a week. Neutral territory, neutral topics. We talked about work, about sports, about nothing important. Slowly, cautiously, we began building something that had never existed before. An actual relationship. He decided not to contact Michael Torres. Not yet. Maybe someday, he said, when I figure out who I am first. His marriage, surprisingly, was strengthening. Jennifer turned out to be more understanding than anyone expected. She says she married me, not my family's name, Ryan told me. I'm not sure I believe her, but I'm grateful she's sticking around to figure it out. As for me, I did something I'd never done before. I took a vacation. 2 weeks in Portugal, alone, with no phone and no agenda. I walked along beaches and through ancient cities. I ate meals at random restaurants and slept until noon. I didn't think about work or family or the Harrison legacy. I just existed. For the first time in 36 years, I let myself simply be. When I came back, I found a letter waiting for me. Handwritten, from Grandpa. "Derek, your grandmother had one last thing she wanted me to tell you, and I've been waiting for the right moment. Here it is. You don't need to be a Harrison to be someone. The name was never what made you valuable. The name was just an accident of birth. What makes you valuable is what you've built, what you've survived, what you've chosen to become in spite of everything working against you. Eleanor wanted me to tell you to keep the documents she left you, not as weapons but as reminders. Reminders that the truth matters, that history can be rewritten, but it can also be preserved, that someone was watching even when you thought you were invisible. You were never invisible to her, and you should never be invisible to yourself. I'm 91 years old. I won't be around much longer, but before I go, I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. You walked through fire, and instead of burning, you came out stronger. That's the real Harrison legacy. Not the money or the name or the houses. It's the ability to endure, to persist, to keep going when everything tells you to give up. You have that, more than anyone else in this family. Keep going, Derek. You've got a lot of life left to live. With love, Grandpa William. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my safe, next to Grandma's letter and the leather folder with all the documents. My inheritance, I realized, was never the money. It was the truth. The truth about who I was, where I came from, why I'd been treated the way I was. The truth that set me free from a lifetime of wondering what was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. There never had been. 6 months later, I got a call from Grandpa's nurse. He'd passed peacefully in his sleep, 92 years old and content, she said, with how things had turned out. The funeral was held at the Harrison estate. The whole family was there, what was left of it anyway. Dad and Mom barely speaking. Ryan and Jennifer standing close together. Cousins and aunts and uncles who'd witnessed the Thanksgiving revelation and hadn't quite figured out how to act around me since. I gave the eulogy. Grandpa had asked me to, in a note he'd left with his lawyer. William Harrison lived for 92 years, I said, standing at the podium and looking out at the faces of my family. He saw the world change in ways he never could have imagined. He watched his family grow and struggle and sometimes fail. And through all of it, he kept the truth. Most families have secrets, things they don't talk about, things they bury and hope will never resurface. Grandpa believed in a different approach. He believed that the truth, no matter how painful, was always better than a comfortable lie. He taught me that, not through lectures or sermons, but through his actions. By keeping documents that someone else wanted destroyed. By waiting for the right moment to share them. By trusting me with the knowledge of who I really was, even when it would have been easier to let me keep wondering. I'm standing here today because of him, because he saw me when others didn't, because he believed I was strong enough to handle the truth. That's the legacy I want to remember, not the money or the property or the business. The courage to be honest, even when it hurts. the faith in truth even when lies would be easier. Grandpa William, wherever you are, thank you for everything. After the service, as people were milling around eating catered finger foods and making awkward small talk, Dad approached me. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. The past 6 months had taken something out of him, some vital force that had kept him upright all these years. Your grandfather left something for you, he said. The lawyer has the details, but I wanted you to know. He left you the estate. I stared at him. This house, the 40 acres, everything except what's specifically designated for other family members in the trust. Dad's voice was flat, empty. He changed his will 5 years ago, long before the Thanksgiving incident. He always knew, apparently, what Eleanor had told him, what she wanted for you. I don't want the house, I said, surprising myself. What? I don't want it. 40 acres of land that represents everything I spent my childhood trying to escape? No thanks. I looked around at the estate that had loomed so large in my imagination for so long. Sell it, or don't. I don't care. Give the money to charity. Give it to Ryan, for all it matters. Dad was speechless, possibly for the first time in his life. I have what I need, I continued. I have the truth. I have Grandma's letters and Grandpa's faith. I have a relationship with Ryan that's more honest than anything we had growing up. I have a life I built myself, without the Harrison name propping me up. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, unaccustomed to physical contact from me. I forgive you, Dad, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this anger anymore. You did the best you could with what you had. It wasn't enough, it wasn't even close to enough, but I believe you didn't know any better. His eyes were wet. I'd never seen my father cry before. I was wrong, he said, the words coming out like they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. About everything. I was so wrong. I know. Can we? Is it too late to? It's not too late to be different going forward. It's too late to fix the past. But the future, I shrugged. The future is unwritten. I walked away from him, out of the estate, into the crisp autumn air. Ryan was waiting by my car. You're not taking the house? He asked. Did you hear all that? Most of it. He smiled, a real smile, the kind I'd rarely seen on his face. I would have taken it, just so you know. I would have grabbed it with both hands and never looked back. I know. That's the difference between us. Is it? He leaned against my car, thoughtful. I used to think the difference was that I was special and you weren't. Then I thought the difference was that you were legitimate and I wasn't. Now I'm starting to think the difference is simpler than either of those things. What's that? You actually know who you are. I'm still trying to figure it out. We stood there in silence for a moment, two men who'd spent their lives as adversaries, finally seeing each other clearly. I'm going to be a better man, Ryan said. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to try. I believe you, even after everything, especially after everything. We're not who our parents made us. We're who we choose to be. He pushed off from the car and extended his hand. I shook it. See you next Tuesday? Lunch? I'll be there. He walked back toward the house, and I got in my car and drove away. The road unwound before me, familiar streets giving way to highways giving way to the kind of open space where you can breathe freely. I thought about everything that had happened since that Thanksgiving dinner. The revelations, the confrontations, the long, slow work of rebuilding. I thought about Grandma Eleanor, writing letters she knew I might not read for decades, keeping faith that someday the truth would matter. I thought about Grandpa William, holding those secrets for years, waiting for the moment when I was ready to receive them. I thought about the parents who couldn't love me the way I needed, and the brother who was never really my brother, and the family that treated me like a ghost in my own story. And I thought about what comes next. The thing about truth is that it doesn't fix everything. It doesn't heal old wounds or restore lost time or transform people who aren't ready to change. All it does is illuminate. It shows you where you are, how you got there, and what's been hiding in the shadows all along. What you do with that illumination is up to you. I choose to keep going, to build a life that isn't defined by the family I was born into, but by the person I decide to become. To maintain whatever fragile connection Ryan and I have managed to create, because even flawed relationships can grow into something better if both people are willing to try. I choose to remember Grandma's words. You are not invisible. You never were. Some people just refuse to see you. I choose to see myself now, clearly, honestly, without the distortions of a childhood spent trying to earn love that was never available. And I choose to believe that the best part of my story is still ahead. Because that's the thing about being invisible for so long. When you finally step into the light, you appreciate it more than anyone. Every ray of sunshine, every moment of being seen, every relationship built on truth instead of pretense. The Harrison estate is behind me now, getting smaller in the mirror until it disappears entirely. Ahead is the open road and a future I get to write myself. For the first time in 36 years, I'm not waiting to be noticed. I'm just living. And that, as it turns out, is enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I've left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family isn't always who you're born to. It's who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it's like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.